Okay, looks like we have a lot of people here, so let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to APS Webinars. I'm so excited to be launching this new webinar series on working in the US, career development for international physicists. The title of today's webinar, the first in this series, is Professional Opportunities for Non-US Citizens. I'm Midhat Farouk, and I'll be your host for today's broadcast. Thank you all so much for joining us. APS webinars are brought to you as a service of the American Physical Society, connecting you with the expertise of individuals who can offer insight into physics careers, educational programs, and professional development for students, working physicists, and educators. APS membership gives you easy access to valuable career information and resources, like this webinar, allows you to get your research out to the community, and network with potential employers or colleagues at our meetings, and have a greater positive impact about issues that are important to you through grassroots advocacy. APS membership can also help connect you to a community of like-minded folks through participation in our forums, divisions, and topical groups. If you are not yet an APS member but value the things that APS provides, we encourage you to consider joining today. I also wanted to share the ways in which APS engages with, serves, and supports the global physics community. With over 23% of our current members living outside of the US, APS provides opportunities to physicists around the world by offering a free one-year student membership, as well as other programs and resources that you can explore through the link provided. To support international physicists, APS Government Affairs consistently advocates for policies that promote scientific mobility. Scientists from around the globe attend APS meetings, and more than 2/3 of the published articles in APS journals are by authors outside of the US. This year, APS is launching a new open access journal, PRX Energy, which will showcase highly selective publications. Submissions are open this summer, and if you'd like to keep up to date on PRX Energy, you can sign up for alerts through the link provided. Okay, so some quick housekeeping before we begin the webinar. The first portion of our broadcast will be presentations by our speakers, and then we will have a period of Q&A at the end. If you would like to ask a question, please type it into the Q&A panel, which you can access by clicking the button on the lower right hand of your Zoom webinar window. You can ask questions anytime through this panel, and we will do our best to answer as many of them as possible, but you can submit them anytime. A link to the recording of today's presentation will be emailed to you after today's event and will be made available on the webinar homepage within 5 business days. We also encourage you to complete the survey upon exiting so that APS webinars can improve its ability to provide you with these valuable services. I also wanted to mention that we now have live captioning available. So if you would like to see captions, you can hit the live transcript button at the bottom of your window and hit subtitles, I believe, to see live captioning. Lastly, before we dive in, I wanted to mention the next broadcast we have coming up in the series in August, Understanding Work Authorizations in the US, H-1B, OPT, green cards, and more. In this webinar, we will have an immigration lawyer and a university professional discuss eligibility requirements for each type of work authorization. We will also hear from international scientists about their unique experiences with finding employment in the US. We have lots of exciting topics planned for the rest of this webinar series, so if you haven't already done so, please sign up for our webinars mailing list using the link shown. You can also find information about these broadcasts on our main webinars homepage. Okay, so with that, let's get started. I would now like to introduce our panelists. Today, our first speaker is Alan J. Hurd. Dr. Hurd is a materials physicist at Los Alamos National Laboratory, where he expands academic collaborations through National Security Education Center. He has previously served in positions at Sandia National Lab and the US Department of State, as well as at the Santa Fe Institute and the International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna. Hurd was a Franklin Fellow at the Department of State, serving with the science advisor to both Secretaries Clinton and Kerry. As a member of the Board of Physics and Astronomy at the National Academy of Sciences, he brings national and international perspectives to science collaboration. Hurd is an APS Fellow who serves in various capacities with the Society to foster growth of international membership equities. He was chair of the APS Committee on International Scientific Affairs, is now chair of the APS Forum on International Physics, and has chaired the membership subcommittee of the APS International Engagement Task Force. For over a decade, Dr. Hurd was the director of the Neutron Scattering Center at LANSC, an international user facility. Prior to Los Alamos, Hurd managed research at Sandia, taught physics at Brandeis, and was an NSF pre-doctoral fellow at the University of Colorado. Cited over 8,000 times, his research has garnered 3 Department of Energy Research Awards. Next, we have John Barnes, who describes himself as a quantum career smith. John is the founder of Entangled Positions, a pure play quantum recruitment agency. Prior to this, John founded Profecta Associates, which is a physics and technology recruitment agency. John has worked in technical recruitment since 2004, and specifically in physics recruitment since 2014. He is a committed community builder in the quantum and AMO ecosystems. Welcome, John. Lastly, I would like to introduce Dr. Dalal Najib, who leads Science and Engineering Capacity Development Activities at the Policy and Global Affairs Division of the U.S. National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. She is the Program Director for the Arab American Frontiers Program of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine at NASAM, in partnership with MENA-based S&T institutions with support from NSF, USAID, and NASA. Dr. Najib also worked on the USAID-funded Partnership for Enhanced Engagement and Research, or the PEER program, where she managed the Africa, Middle East, and more recently, the Central Asia Transboundary Water Resources Management portfolio. Dr. Najib first joined the National Academies as a Mirzaya Science and Technology Policy Fellow at the Aeronautics and Space Engineering Board. She holds a PhD in Climate and Space Sciences and Engineering from University of Michigan with support from the NASA Earth and Space Sciences Fellowship. She also completed a master's degree in public policy from the Gerald Ford School of Public Policy with a focus on science and technology policy in developing countries. Prior to that, she received her undergraduate degree in aerospace and aeronautical engineering from Supero in Toulouse, France. She speaks French, Arabic, English, and Spanish. Wow. And with that, I welcome all of our panelists and hand it over to Dr. Hurd. Please take it away.
Thank you so much, Midhat. That was, it's really remarkable what you're doing. I found in my outreach to students, postdocs around the world, that career development topics are really, #1 in terms of their priorities, and we really have to do a good job of serving that part of the physics community. Your first homework assignment is to join the APS, if you haven't done so already. And your second is to join the Forum on International Physics. I'm going to address national laboratories in the US. And the first question is, what is a national laboratory? What does it have to do with this, this photo of the Earth and a satellite? Well, I'll give you a story in national security. This is about Vela. It's a system of satellites from the Cold War era. In 1946, the US started atmospheric testing, and it was soon thereafter that the Soviets began to test in the atmosphere and above ground in general. Very quickly, physicists learned that there's a certain optical signature, actually a photon signature, it's not necessarily visible optics, a double pulse that comes out. So this gives a nice way to monitor the other guys. The other side is to look for signatures of a nuclear detonation. Therefore, the United States developed a system of satellites called Vela that were put into space in 1963. The first one was, and there was a system of such satellites. Los Alamos stepped up in this crash program, as our director said. because we've always done crash programs ever since 1943. Well, while these satellites could monitor the surface of the Earth for nuclear detonations to verify treaties, it was a concern at the time that, well, what if the Soviets are testing on the dark side of the moon? That sounds pretty outlandish, but in fact, the Soviets were, really the premier space agency back in the late 50s and the 60s. Well, at Los Alamos, these two guys, Klebesevil and Olson, found an event, a signature that wasn't quite the double pulse, but 3 satellites concurred, and they could triangulate the timing of that event. And sure enough, it did not point at the Earth. When the event did not occur on the Earth, but it also didn't point to the moon, as was the great fear. It was extraterrestrial. It was, in fact, it was extragalactic. So they quickly converged with Sterling Colgate, who was a preeminent astrophysicist in the state of New Mexico. In fact, he was from Los Alamos. At the time, he was at New Mexico Tech. He predicted that gamma ray bursts would occur as a result of supernovae. And this is exactly what was happening. Of course, that discovery transformed astrophysics and to some degree cosmology thereafter. It all came out of a national security problem. By the way, Sterling Colgate, I said he was from Los Alamos. He was indeed a staff member at the lab for many years, but he was also a high school student before the lab on the Los Alamos site at the famous Los Alamos Ranch School. Yes, his name Colgate is indeed the same as the toothpaste people. Now, testing has changed, and the lab mission here has changed. Every lab has a different mission. Stockpile stewardship is no longer an atmospheric testing program. It's really a computer testing program. We won't talk any more about that, but I just want to emphasize that this is the kind of evolution that you find in mission space of the National Lab system. But what is a national lab? I'll focus only on US national labs. Keep in mind that there are many international, many countries have national labs. And I will also first describe what is the spectrum of research that's done at national labs. Well, universities and industry have well-defined missions, from research through the valley of death to production and scale-up. National labs try to fill in that development and applied research in the valley of death. Notice too that national labs have a significant amount of fundamental research on the very far left end of this scale. The US Department of Energy has 20 national labs, and the 3 national security labs are shown here labeled, 2 in New Mexico and 1 in California. They constitute somewhat the highest bar in terms of entry by international personnel, but it can be done, and I will tell you how it's done. The other national labs will be familiar to you, such as Brookhaven, Fermilab, Argonne, Oak Ridge, and in general, the bar is lower for international participation. The US Department of Energy is not the only name only game in town. National Science Foundation has major labs such as the Magnet Labs and Synchrotron. Department of Commerce has the NIST labs and NOAA. And NSF, by the way, has probably about 50 centers and large facilities around the world. Likewise, the Department of Defense has at least 3 main labs: Army, Air Force, Navy. And NASA has at least 4 major labs, including JPL. The Department of Defense is really the big kahuna here because they have about 100 centers of research around the world. Some of them are actually international. Now, how do you, what is the entry point at a place like Los Alamos, which is perhaps the one DOE lab with the highest fences in terms of classified research? Well, number one, we've been hiring and training international students, postdocs, and staff ever since our founding in 1943. And this is a very brief overview of what the pipeline looks like. We have student pipeline, visas typically F1, postdocs, J1 and H1B, and staff with green cards and H1B, of course, working towards citizenship. So it can be done, and you might be worried that, well, I'm from India or I'm from China, so I can't work at Los Alamos. Not true. Yes, there are some sensitive countries, those that have nuclear programs, and a couple of them are listed here. There are also some embargoed countries which are much higher bar, a little more difficult for us to work with. But in general, we do the paperwork. We when it comes to talent that we are competing for, we simply work through these issues. Now, lifestyle choices tend to be a really strong determinant of your career directions. And I do urge you to keep that in mind. Part of lifestyle is not just outside of work. Inside work, it has to do with the culture of the laboratory. And definitely at Los Alamos, and I would say all of the national security DOE labs, team science is the way we do things. So that's a really energizing thing. These are huge labs, and the scientific footprint is just enormous. In addition to social aspects of your lifestyle, a place like Los Alamos has a lot of, let's say, outdoorsy things to do. My office happens to be about 100 feet from the end of this bridge. So in 20 minutes, I can leave this place and be on the ski lift. I can ski for lunch. And that's been true since the beginning of the laboratory and the Manhattan Project. Here's Niels Bohr on our local ski hill in 1946. So it's a rich experience, and I think you'll find that true of all of the national labs, regardless of which one you decide to pursue. My thinking is that don't be shy, go for it. This is a rewarding career choice, and you can see maybe a little flavor of how that all works from the standpoint of Los Alamos. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hurd. Next, we will hear from John Barnes.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here tonight. And thanks to Crystal and Midhat for an APS for putting this on. And it is great to be here with Alan and Dalal, and obviously for everyone in the audience to join us. So following on from what Alan said, so I'm, as Midhat mentioned at the start, I'm a recruiter. I work with commercial or industrial entities. So what that means is your career choices are slightly different to the national labs or academia. And I think one of the key things at the start of any journey, whether it's commercial, industrial, governmental, it really starts with yourself. And I think the most important first step is really working out what's important to you. So what are your interests? What are your goals and aspirations? What problems do you want to solve? Because working within physics, physics touches on basically everything that we interact with on a daily basis. So there's a lot of choices that you can have to really find the most fulfilling path from you. So whilst your journey may change and your aspirations and goals and tastes may evolve or differ, understanding what way your journey should start, what way your journey should start off at is really important. And it's often something that's neglected by people when they're looking to move forward in their careers, and particularly those going from academia into industry. So I think that would be my first thing. And if there's one thing you take from the talk from my side tonight, it would be that to focus on yourself and what you're looking to achieve. Then as you sort of move forward, there's some things that are crucial to all people. There's some things that are more important for international workers or people that don't live in the country of their birth. So I think, from what I gather, a lot of the people today are going to be PhDs and postdocs, possibly on OPTs, and really looking to take their sort of first steps into industry, either at the moment or in the near future. So one of the things I think that a lot of people talk to me about is the interview process. And I think as a recruiter, I would probably refer to it as the candidate journey as often as I do the interview process. So what that really means is it's a two-way process. So whilst a company is looking at you and finding out whether you're right for the role and the company, it's also a time for you to ask them questions. So there's a lot of questions you can ask as someone, as a person who's in the same country, but some of the things that you may find as an international employee, particularly if you're on an OPT or an EAD, is don't be afraid to ask them, what is your immigration lawyer support? What systems and protocols have you got in place so that during my time I can transition to an H-1B and or a green card or indeed citizenship. Feel free to ask about the ED&I policy. Some people are a little bit shy of asking that question, but it's one of those things that most companies would relish the chance to discuss that with you. And if the company isn't keen to discuss that, they may not be the right place to work in the first place. And that comes down to that two-way process again. So I think as a non-US citizen, of course, there will be challenges, but there's also advantages. So, for example, if you are, so I've just heard just seen something come up from the chat. So ED&I policy. So whilst there are challenges to be an international employee, there are also advantages. So, for example, when you're interviewing and indeed working, so straight away you've experienced different cultures. You can bring a different vantage point, a different mindset to things. You're able to offer a diversity of views that perhaps other people aren't able to do that. And I think there's a lot of research that shows that the most diverse teams are indeed the highest performing teams. So that's something that that you can certainly bring to the equation. Alongside that as well, many of you will be multilingual. So, and one of the things when I speak with hiring managers, one of the things that so many people that transfer from academia to industry let themselves down on is some sort of basic communication skills, not spell checking emails, and just really not picking up on questions they've been asked, and that basic communication skills. If you do that and English is your first language, great. If it's your second language, you look even better, because a lot of the peers that are going for the same roles aren't doing that. So there's certainly challenges, but there's also advantages with that. So always understand your own value and the things you can bring to an organization. And I think these are the sorts of points that when you focus on yourself, what you're looking to achieve and what you can bring, it changes the dynamic of the whole process. And it really allows you to take control of your future. So that would be the areas that I would certainly focus on. And whilst we're whilst you're doing that, you're able to then empower yourself and take yourself forward on that journey. So I keep seeing the questions come up about the policy. So it's equity and diversity. So basically asking an employer what their diversity policy is. So I apologize for using acronyms. They don't always translate as well as we sometimes expect. And yeah, so obviously, I think later on we've got a Q&A session. So it would certainly be good for some of these questions to come back up, and we can look to explore them in more detail.
Okay, great. Thanks so much for that, John. And next we have Dalal. Please take it away.
Thank you, Midhat. I'll try to share my screen. Okay. Okay, so what I'll talk to you about today are fellowship opportunities at the National Academy of Sciences and broader career opportunities in science policy, particularly for international students and non-citizens in the US. So I will tell you first a little story about my personal journey. I come from Morocco, from Casablanca, which is not like the movie that you've seen. It's more of a big metropolitan city, urban heart, an economic heart of Morocco. And I came to the US via France to study space research at University of Michigan. When I was at University of Michigan, I was very much intrigued by how, by the applicability of the research I was doing to particularly the developing countries or the region I was coming from, of the parts of the world, but also to address big societal problems. Since this is the first time I'm on an audience where they actually will understand roughly what I was working on 10 years ago, which is the interaction of fast-flowing plasma with the atmosphere of non-magnetized planets. So basically, Mars atmosphere interaction with the sun, Titan or Enceladus interaction with Saturn, ionosphere or plasma. And I participated back then, as you see in the picture on the right, in a number of international efforts, convening folks from Sweden, Japan, China, Europe, the US, to solve problems, scientific problems together. And I was also very intrigued by that other question, is that there are many questions that require international engagement and cooperation. When I was at University of Michigan, I enrolled in a Master's of Public Policy, as Midhat mentioned, with a focus on science and technology policy and its impact on development. And the next step was going to the National Academies to enroll in this Christine Merzai's S&T Fellowships, S&T Policy Fellowship, which I will talk a little bit more about later. And after that, I actually stayed on at the National Academies, where I worked on a number of international development and international collaboration programs. And now I'm mostly focused on science and engineering capacity development and early career engagement and capacity building at the National Academy of Sciences. So this is my career path, but I actually started as an aerospace engineer, did my research more in physics, space physics, and now I'm in science policy, so working at the National Academy of Sciences. And before we move forward, I just want to pause and give you just a very brief overview about the National Academies. We are a non-governmental organization organization. I know many people think we're government, but actually we're not. But our role is to advise the US government in all matters of science, engineering, and medicine. We were founded by a congressional decree. We have here the picture of Abraham Lincoln and others in 1863 during the Acts of Incorporation of the National Academy of Sciences. But there is also the National Academy of Engineering and the National Academy of Medicine, and all of us are under the umbrella of an organization of the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. We are mostly known for our consensus studies, convening activities, operational programs. We have the Policy and Global Affairs Division, under which I work, which has a wide range of international activities in which US and non-US citizens can be engaged, because we really need experts to inform our activities, and experts who do have that international breadth and experience, professionally and personally. Our unique strength has to do with the stature of our membership, and many of our experts, actually all of our experts, serve pro bono in our committees, and we are known for our independence and objectivity and expertise. And in our international activities, most of them work on responding to critical global challenges, building capacity internationally, but also domestically, and pursuing direct relationships between US researchers and their foreign counterparts, and advising the US government when it comes to foreign engagement through science and technology with other countries. So many will ask, so what do you do? Because when you were a physicist, you were doing research. Most of my time was actually writing code in Fortran to build a model, to develop a model of Mars and Venus. And now what do you do? Well, the first part is program development, which in a way has an intellectual creativity part that's very exciting, and kind of mirrors in a way what you would do when you are doing research, because you're investigating something and trying to push the boundaries of knowledge and come up with something new. But we also do other things, which is relationship building, fundraising and writing proposals. That's pretty much similar to academia, convening activities, capacity building, early career engagement. We do have proceedings. We have to prepare and publish some papers as well, but we also make budgets, HR decisions. That's also something that many managers in academia or in labs do, and staff management. And again, so those are just examples of my works. On the top right, on the top left is actually a site visit on climate change impacts on the fisheries in a lake in Mongolia. So that was in a way kind of close enough to my background, but it can also be, developing a solar grid in a Maasai village, which is the bottom right picture. If those of you who are interested in science policy, they wonder, well, again, I'm a physicist, do I have the skill sets required for this career? And my answer is, you would be surprised, because, well, we see as research skill sets or programming, lab skills, could be, dealing with equipment, you have expertise, grant writing, but policy skills, as explained here, is about building coalitions, identifying stakeholders, knowledge of legislation, and having a wider policy network. But there is some overlap, and the overlap has to do with the critical thinking that you bring in from your scientific background, the collaborative work or teamwork that's also inherent to scientific teams, but also to policy teams, the strategic thinking that's also similar, and scientific network, and the analysis, the analytical thinking that you bring into the table. So there's way more overlap than one would think. And what I'd like to also mention is, I'm promoting here, obviously, I went through a science policy career, but I also would like just to encourage folks to explore, scientific policy impact of their work while conducting research. So consider, reaching out to policymakers and see how that can impact their research. Now, let's talk about career opportunities for international students or postdocs, and also fellowships at NASA, that are kind of in line with what I just discussed. So the Science and Technology Policy Fellowship, the Mirzayan Fellowship, that's the one I used as a transition from academia to science policy. And it is one of the few fellowships that actually are open to international students. I will mention others, but I'm talking talking about science policy fellowships, and it's a 12-week fellowships at the National Academy of Sciences. So 12 weeks is not a big commitment. It can be, I validated it as an internship for my Master's of Public Policy, but it can also be used as, during your OPT or whatnot in between graduation and a postdoc. And it's a great exposure to the work of the National Academies, and you're embedded into a board or, a project that's kind of related to your field. So my field was in space research, so I worked at the aeronautics and space engineering field. Others could work in the, global health, we have a division that's more related to physical sciences. The work of the academy and the breadth of its work is very wide, and it is open to international students as long as you can validate it as your OPT. It will not provide you with a work authorization. So you need to have a visa that allows you to take time off and work or validate this fellowship as an OPT. There is a stipend that's provided to offset living expenses, but it's not a scholarship. And more information are on our website, which is cited here below. Normally, up to now, up to pre-COVID, most cycles were, the Mirzayan fellowships were in the winter, and now it will actually be in the fall, and I wonder how it will play out moving forward, but I will just encourage you to keep an eye on the website for the 2022 cycle. We also have research associateship program. These actually are not a science policy fellowship. Those are research opportunities in US national labs, which my colleague Alan talked about previously. So, it's for graduate students, postdocs, and senior level researchers. And the application is open 4 times per year. And this program is run by the National Academy of Sciences, the review process, but also the administration of the award. And the bottom line is to do your homework and identify a host laboratory and research advisor prior to applying who's willing to fund you. But there is a list of opportunities that are listed on the National Academy's website of labs and advisors who will be willing to, who are looking for someone to host, but you have to do your homework before that and arrange that prior to applying. Some national labs have eligibility that is specific to them. So while this program overall is open to non-US citizens, there is also, some specificities attached to each host, and the eligibility can change from one host institution to another. And for more information, you have the website at the bottom. And last, I just wanted to mention the New Voices in Science, Engineering, and Medicine program. That's another program under my portfolio. And it is not a fellowship, but I think it will be very interesting for folks who are interested in science policy, but would like to continue doing academic research or research in wherever institution they are, but still have a foot in the door and explore the National Academy's work. So then the New Voices program has 3 objectives: is to expand the diversity of expertise in the advice and the advisory functions of the National Academy of Sciences, provide new modes of communication for the National Academy to be more effective in its outreach and dissemination, and inform our program development. This is an excellent opportunity for members of the New Voice cohort who are usually early to mid-career to grow professionally and serve kind of as ambassadors of the national academies in domestic and international meetings, and kind of be embedded in our committees and learn about the way we do work. But it's not a fellowship. You keep your job, and you just have 4 meetings in within 2 years time period, which is the tenure of each cohort. And the cohort is about 20 people in size, I would say between 18 and 22. We're about to announce the second cohort in a few days. And it's very competitive, but it's an excellent opportunity to learn about science policy, and it is open to non-US citizens and to non-green card holders. So you don't have to have a green card, you don't have to have US citizenship. You should be based in a US institution, could be academia, government, industry, to be eligible to apply. But it's a fantastic opportunity to also tap into our programs. And we just are wrapping up our review process, but we hope that this program will open the solicitation again. So keep an eye out on it for the next cohort. And how else can you engage in S&T policy and in NASAM activities? So, you know, those are just examples I've given you, but we have tons of activities, many events that are open to the public. Many, well, right now it's actually mostly webcasts, but hopefully we'll go back to in-person meetings soon. But we also are part of the InterAcademy Partnership, which is a partnership of multiple academies of sciences all over the world. Again, as one of my colleagues mentioned earlier, as international students or scholars, you bring in diverse, fresh, innovative perspective, particularly from about international issues that will be beneficial to many programs. And we're always looking in our division for committee members who have that breadth of expertise, but to serve and inform our activities, but also serve as reviewers for grants programs. So there are many ways to engage. I think it's just important to show up and also be aware of these opportunities, obviously, which is why I'm grateful that APS has organized this webinar. And before closing, I also wanted to mention a few other opportunities here that are also open to international students. So the American Institute of Physics has a congressional fellowship that doesn't have citizenship requirements. It's one of the few ones that actually we could find that doesn't have that requirement. So please, check it out. There is the AAAS case workshop on science advocacy. There are media fellowships. And for World Bank and United Nations, they have a young professional program that is open to all eligible countries. I mean, for the World Bank, are World Bank eligible countries, and they have certain fields or areas. So it could be, topics that are in alignment with your expertise, for example, related to energy. And in fact, in that particular case, not being a US citizen is often an advantage if it's a country that is not, that's underrepresented under the World Bank. For the United Nations, it's, I think it's a rotation basis. So every year they have specific countries that are eligible. And it's, again, it's about demonstrating that the skill sets you bring in, and that's what I discussed earlier, is very much not only useful, but it's critical, and it brings a novel perspective to the conversation based on your experience in research, but also your international experience, having lived in 2 countries, language expertise, etc. And last but not least, some states fellowships, S&T policy fellowships, are open to non-US citizens, namely the one in California and New Jersey. If you spend some time on Google just researching, and I think our colleagues at APS have been compiling a list of potential activities and fellowships, you'll find a wide range of opportunities. It's not easy, particularly in science policy, where many organizations do have the citizenship requirements. It can be a daunting task, but at the same time, I think it's very rewarding when you look into the international science policy realm, because it's very, it's a place that really welcomes the international perspectives you bring. And I think there is also opportunity to tap into what's our home countries. I mean, I came from Morocco, and I'm Moroccan American, but there are linkages that scholars, international scholars, where they can serve as bridges between their home countries and the US. And finally, don't forget that many countries do have in their embassies in Washington, DC, they have offices for science and technology where they look for science attaches. And I know people who served in their home embassies as science attaches in Washington, DC, and some other embassies like the UK embassy welcomes other folks from other countries to serve in the embassy as science attaché as well. So keep your mind open. I think this is another non-traditional path, but I think it's also something to be aware of. And thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Dalal. That was an amazing overview. I loved your story and just how comprehensive a picture you provided for us. So I really appreciate you doing this. Thank you to all of our panelists. I think we've had some great talks today, and we're getting lots of questions, and we're getting a lot of questions answered as well in the Q&A box, but we're going to go ahead and ask one of them. So the question is, I'm a rising senior at a university. I'm currently interested in computational physics. My question is, where can I find mentors who are willing to give some guidance to me in this field? Alan, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, sure. Let's see. Mentors in a field. Now, I know that John has some things to say about this as well. I am delighted to announce that APS has a mentorship program, and I'm betting that MidHat will have more to say about that. Other professional societies likewise have created mentorship programs. Not always so easy to access, but I would encourage, first of all, join the APS. Second, contact the membership team at the APS to find out about these things. Now, it's also true that perhaps the most effective pathway is to get help in working the network. You know, let's say within a university system or a laboratory, to identify who is doing computational physics in this case, that would interest you, and making a one-on-one connection just is irreplaceable.
Yes, I would like to add to that. Thank you, Alan, for talking about our program. So we have, APS has an industry mentorship program. I wrote about it in the chat box. It's called Impact. So you can go to impact.aps.org. And I want to add that recently our international affairs team worked quite diligently to get more international mentors added to that system. So please check that out. I also wanted to add that if you're interested in networking and making connections, we have a virtual career fair coming up. Registration is free for all attendees. So if you're searching for jobs now or just exploring careers, I encourage you to sign up. I'm going to add the link in the chat right now. And I want to see if John had anything to add to this, the mentorship question.
Yes, I think first of all, echoing what Alan said, groups like APS, have some fantastic schemes and mentorship programs available. And I think that it's a great question because it actually opens up more than just that aspect of it, because the one thing to bear in mind is it's never too soon to start networking. So really look at, if you take a tool like LinkedIn, for example, you can find people that are maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years further on along the path you want to take. And as Anna mentioned, reach out and get that personal touch. You can do that by joining groups that people are in. And a lot of people, they think that these people that are further along their careers are somehow kind of demigods in their ivory towers. But actually, most people want to help the next generation come through. So you'd be surprised actually that quite a few people will want to help the next generation come through. They will want to help smooth that path and help you make some good decisions and avoid bad decisions. So don't be put off by reaching out to people. And even if at first people aren't connecting with you, keep going, because people will connect with you. And it doesn't hurt when you reach out, ask a question and just say, I like what you're doing. I'd love to sort of follow in your footsteps. What advice have you got? Because people will want to help you, and a little bit of flattery goes a long way as well to make that first connection. And on top of that, you may find that in years to come, you may be in the right place at the right time to get a job that's not publicized. You may find out things that are happening that you wouldn't otherwise. And I think, yeah, that whole networking piece and getting that personal touch is hugely important.
Yes, absolutely. Informational interviews are your secret weapon to making connections. Thanks, John. Next question is for Dalal. So there are two questions. I'm going to combine them. Why did you switch from academia to science policy? And also, how was your transition from your fellowship to your full-time position? And what processes did you have to go through in terms of immigration?
Okay, thanks for this question. So as I hinted to when I was talking about my experience in University of Michigan, I was enjoying my PhD. I actually really liked the research components of it, but I was asking myself questions about the applicability or the impact it will have in developing countries in particular. I mean, as I said, I come from Morocco, but I was working on Mars and Venus. So I realized it was potentially not a priority for my country to work on space research. And I was intrigued by, how science and technology can have direct impacts on society. So not to say that those are not valid research. I mean, this is something I really was passionate about, but that's what kind of drew me towards science policy, is to look into science for development and look at those pressing research questions that are impacting people's livelihoods. So I was lucky to be at the University of Michigan, where they had a new program, which is Science, Technology, and Public Policy. And just to tell you, many universities right now are exploring that interface of science and policy, offering certificate programs to scientists, engineers to take a few credits courses in public policy and vice versa. And after doing that certificates program, I decided to go for the master's because I was intrigued about economics, ethical questions. And the Mirzayan Fellowship was, in a way, the internship to validate my master's. Now, transitioning from my Mirzayan Fellowship, which was in space policy, to international development, which in a way was where I was trying to get to, had to do in a way with timing. I happened to join the National Academies in winter 2011. And if those of you remember, winter 2011 was the beginning of the Arab Spring. So it was a time of, upheaval where many, there was a lot of young people who were highly educated but unemployed were in the streets asking for new policy change in that part of the world. And I think 2 years before President Obama had given his famous Cairo speech, where he was asking or calling for a new beginning in engagement with the Arab and Muslim world through science and technology as a vehicle for diplomacy. And I think those two elements combined made it that the National Academies was pursuing developing a new program to tap into those young people and provide in the Arab region, connect them with their US counterparts and provide them with a platform for visibility and to engage more. I happened to be in the right place at the right time. So as my fellowship ended, there was this position posted and I applied for it. Just as a side note here, I think quite a few people applied for this position, and they were looking for someone with a PhD in sciences, because a lot of our work had to do with cutting edge science. So we should be able to understand it. So also policy background was a plus, and there were quite a few people who had the policy and science background. I'd like to believe that my ability to speak Arabic fluently was maybe one that gave me the edge for that particular position, which is a lesson learned in that there are all those additional skills that one should be honing, or because that's what makes the difference or allows you maybe to step up when some opportunity arises. Now, for the immigration question, the National Academy does, well, at least for me, they have sponsored my H-1B. And then so that the H-1B is basically to be able to work at the National Academies. I don't know, this was 10 years ago, but for the green card, I would not get into immigration minutiae or details, but I remember I mentioned to Midhat that there is the national interest waiver, which is another opportunity that folks can pursue, which I pursued myself to be able to apply for permanent residency. And I think that's something that you probably will learn more about in the immigration webinar.
Yes, definitely. Thank you all of our speakers for reminding everyone that we do have a specific webinar to answer all of your immigration questions next month. So I hope you'll join us for that. Okay, so the next question is for John. As a PhD from Europe, do you even have a chance to land a first job in industry in the US, because the companies can choose from thousands of graduates from US universities, so don't have to sponsor a visa?
So I work with people going from Europe to the US and US to Europe. I think there was a question about Latin America in the chat as well. And probably the correct but frustrating answer is there's no hard and fast answer. It very much depends on what your skill set is, how in demand or how rare that is at the time. So, for example, I work heavily within quantum technologies. And there are some things that people are able to sponsor, some things that they're not able to sponsor. On top of that, every time that there's a new government in place, the rules tend to change drastically. And then there's also the aspects of the companies. So some companies are able or are more easily able to provide sponsorship. So it's a very complex situation, and it entirely depends on the individuals involved. So yourself, the organisation, and the country as well. However, now whilst that's probably left more questions than answers, what I would say is, in those circumstances, always ask the question. Don't just assume that you can't do something. Ask the question, because I work with some companies and they're not able to sponsor, but then for the same person, another company can. So that's something that always try and ask the question, always find out, and don't die wondering. That's probably the main thing. But it very much depends on your skill set and what that country requires. So just ask the question.
Thank you so much. And we do have great questions coming in, but unfortunately it is time for us to wrap up. This is all the time we have today for the official webinar. I apologize if we did not get to your question, but we encourage you to follow up by sending an email to webinars@aps.org, and we will forward your questions to our speakers for comment. I also want to remind you that a recording of today's presentation will be sent via email and will also be available on our webinar homepage. Please allow 5 business days for upload, and then you should be able to view the recording. Also, please take a moment to give us some feedback as you leave today by filling out our short survey. It really does help us improve future broadcasts. Thank you to all of our panelists. Please remember to sign up for future series so you can continue watching these broadcasts. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to our panelists, and I hope you all have a great day. American Physical Society, copyright 2020, all rights reserved.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.